Brand new today on the channel, your first look at the Geprc Crocodile75 V3.
Hey guys, I'm Rebecca. You have a chance to win this DJI FPV drone, the case, and 2 batteries. We're gonna choose one of the next 100,000 subscribers to be our lucky winner. So please subscribe, good luck, and happy FPV.
Welcome back to the channel, guys. If you're thinking about flying long-range FPV, there are a lot of things to consider. First and foremost is trust. You wanna be able to trust the quad that you're flying, the components on board, the motors, the power system, the antenna, as well as the GPS system on board, and the transmitter and the RX and TX. So I'm going to talk about that today in this video, and I'm going to give you a full review of this brand new Crocodile75 V3. Let's go ahead and get it up in the air. We'll do a flight test with it out in the field. We'll do some range flying, and then we'll come back to the bench. We'll talk about this drone on the bench and what it has to offer. It starts in at around $460, I believe, for the analog version. It goes up from there for the DJI 03 version. So without further ado, let's fire up some crossfire. Let's do some range flying. All right, guys, there it is. There's the box. Now it's time to test fly the Croc75. Okay, guys, there it is. This is the box you would get in the mail if you order the Crocodile75 V3. This is the box I got, and I have to tell you guys, I have been waiting for this box to show up pretty much all year because all of the other companies have released their 7-inch version with GPS and O3. So a lot of the new 7 inches are now coming with DJI O3, and the frames are modified to fit that camera, which I think is super awesome. Everybody loves O3. It's a lot of fun to fly, but for guys that want to fly analog, they still make an analog version of this quad as well. So we have some 7.5-inch props in here from HQ. These are super kind of mid-range cord. You can see the taper here in the middle is not super fat. Some of the Gym Fan long-range props I've seen recently have a little fatter cord in the center, so I like to see this a little narrower, kind of medium cord to a nice taper tip there. What that allows is a really nice, smooth-sounding 7.5-inch quad, which this thing sounds amazing when it comes up off the ground. It's quieter than you would think, and it's a lot quieter than some of the 5-inch quads, race quads and freestyle quads. So there it is out of the box, and the two antennas here that go on the back. And let's go ahead and get into what makes this one different, and what I like about it, maybe what I don't like about it, and maybe also what Geprc could probably add to make this even better. Let's go ahead and talk about the specs. So the specs on the Crocodile75 V3, the frame itself is the Geprc L775 V3. This frame, you can get it and build it yourself. You can get it for around, I believe it's around $120 or so. I'll put the link in the video here if you want to build your own. And I suggest using the flight controller that they put on here. It's the brand new Span F722 BT HD V2 edition with the Span G50A BL Heli 32 ESCs. They're 4-in-1. They are two separate boards in here. They're not a single AIO board. They're two separate boards. So if one burns out, you can place one or the other, which is kind of nice. And that is a fairly expensive flight controller, but it works well. And I think that the tune on here is probably about an 8 out of 10 stars. I would say the tune is, I would say it's maybe just under what I flew on the Chimera for the stock tune. I feel like the Chimera might have a little bit better tune, but I mentioned that I'm gonna do a tune on this one and give to the community. It's pretty hard to tune a 7.5-inch because of all the vibes. The bigger the motors are, the more vibes you have. But an F7, it is tunable and it is possible. So I will share that tune with you guys coming up, as well as a full setup guide for this quad. Now the arms on here, these are 6mm arms, and they have 2 bumpers on the end right here, protecting that on a hard landing. Your motor bell, your coils look pretty nice. They're really nice, thick copper coils on the inside, nice polished aluminum stator. It's sort of a gray aluminum, and I really like the way these wheels look on the very top. It looks like almost like a car rim. They look super cool. We've got that standard bolt, and these are hollow core shafts. We've got 4 bolts on the bottom of this going through this motor bumper, and these work out pretty well. I took a driver around the entire quad and tightened up all the bolts before I went out for my maiden flight. I suggest you guys do that. So when you get a brand new quad from China, make sure you tighten it up all the way around. Make sure every bolt is seated on the quad before you fly. The Croc 75 top plate is 2.5mm. The bottom plate of the Croc is 3mm, and it is beveled 3K carbon fiber. And mostly on this quad, we have M3 hardware, top and bottom, as well as some M2 hardware holding down this O3 in the very back. It also came with a full-size GoPro mount, which I'm not going to use because I have the O3 on board. And I'd like to see that they also used anodized aluminum, kind of a red anodized aluminum on here, washer underneath the M3 hardware. That way this hardware doesn't rip through and tear up your GoPro mount, which is a really nice detail from Geprc. We also see some of that same hardware on the TPU mounting GPS and antenna system in the very back of the quad. Now, one important thing I wanted you guys to see is the difference between the hardware on the iFlight Chimera This does have kind of beveled edges on their GoPro mount bolts here, but they're not recessed to the top plate. So they can rub on your long range battery here, and in the back here, as well as in the center here, they do stick out. They have a 3M piece of battery tape here that's gonna be pretty decent. It's about 3mm thick. Should cover the top of that bolt, but all of the Croc 75 bolts on the top for the battery have been surface flush mounted. So that makes a big difference. They cut down into the carbon a little bit, give a little bit of a bevel. That way you're not gonna have any hardware rubbing on your battery during flight. Also new in this 75 version is the side plate. You see a side plate from front to back now, and what I thought was interesting about this side plate, once I took the top plate off, I noticed that these were also removable, very easily removable. The standoffs run down through them, but they're also in sections. So if you wanted to pull off this back part and expose your O3 for a little better airflow, you can do that. If you want to pull off where the flight controller is, you can do that. You see a separation right around here, and they are two separate pieces, which I really like a lot. You also have access points for binding up your O3 here. You have your Betaflight USB port here for the Span F7, and over here on this side, we have total access to the O3 for firmware updates. And they both have XT60s on here, and they both also have an angle that I'm not a big fan of, because if I want to use one of the smaller batteries, say like the 6S 4000 milliamp pack, it's a kind of a bricky style battery. It's about the shape of a square, about like this, and you would have to offset, which offsets the CG. The cord just doesn't reach to this angle that they've made here. I've talked about this before. I don't like this, and I really wish they could just make a straight up type of battery plug system. It's just really annoying that they, and this one has more of an angle. The Chimera, you have to have your battery even a little bit further back to reach and accommodate that. So if you have kind of a short battery cord, it makes it hard to get the CG perfect and have your battery right in the middle of the quad, unless you have a super long XT60 cable. And oh yeah, it looks like Geprc decided to give more kV in their motors, but they also went a little smaller. I thought that the Chimera motors were a little bit large, running all the way up to 2809, but they have a 1250 kV motor for that large motor, which does give a pretty decent flight time, but the little bit of larger motor on here draws a little more amps. So I'm interested to do a side-by-side amp comparison of which one draws the most amps. My suspect is that the 2809 is going to draw more amps than our 2806.5 here, but we are at 1350 kV, so that may average out. We'll have to see in the long run, but both of these quads are capable of getting that 20 to 30 minute flight time on that 6S 8000 milliamp pack. And if we look at the Chimera on top and the Geprc 75 on the bottom here, you can see that they offer two different types of camera protection. This one has the aluminum front plate with the standoff in the front here, and a little bit of flat spot here, two bolts on the side. They also give you those dampeners to kind of smooth out the video. They were having some issues with some jello in these cameras, so that should help people if you install those. And on the Geprc one, we have decent coverage, also some venting, and this is all one piece right here. So this can be replaced in all one piece. And we have no standoff on this design that is visible here. I kind of push on it a little bit, but it seems pretty solid, top to bottom protection and side to side. So it's looking pretty durable, and it doesn't give any flex on the very bottom right here, which is a good sign for durability. Some venting on the side there to allow air to go through to the back where the O3 unit is. Now, it was also interesting to me to see their concept for their antenna mount system in the back. This is non-tiltable back here, so you can't point this up anymore. But I was getting upwards of 17 satellites on this GPS, so that is good news. And that's a Geprc M8U GPS on there. That is a U-Blocks GPS. And just below that, we have a vertical mounted system type of Momoda antenna back here for the O3. And I've flown those antennas before. They're also a little bit shorter than the iFlight Chimera Pro antennas back here. And these are side to side mount, and you can bring those up put them however you want. But it's interesting that Gep went with this style top to bottom here versus side to side. So a little bit different type of design than the Chimera7 Pro. Another difference between these two quads is pretty plain to see. If you look closely, iFlight Chimera Pro has a little bit bigger strap. They also have, it looks like kind of a plastic coating over the top here and on the bottom with some pretty thick stitching. This will hold the 6S 8000 pack, and I think iFlight thought about that when they made this quad. The Geprc one does hold the 4S 7000 pretty comfortably on here, and I believe you could possibly get the 6S 8000 on here with these straps. They do have a rubber coating on the very bottom, but up top here it's just plain Velcro where this comes around, and they had to silkscreen their logo there, and it is 20 by 250 there. So this is a little bit smaller strap. I would have liked to seen a little bit larger strap for the Geprc Crocodile75. I also noticed right away in Betaflight that Geprc decided to use the right turn rear configuration. That's the more traditional quad motor rotation setup, whereas the Chimera Pro uses props out configuration. The right rear motor is turning to the left. So just note that inside Betaflight if you get either one of these quads. Now let's go ahead and weigh the most popular 7-inch bind and fly quads out there all together in one group. Let's go ahead and put the 75 on there. The V3 75 Croc is coming in at 685 grams with the tri-blade props. Let's go ahead and weigh the Foxeer quad. This has bi-blade on there, I know, but this one's a little bit lighter in 578 grams for this airframe. And let's check out the Axis, and we'll see what he weighs in at. 686 grams for this frame and props and everything. And that one's the foldable 7-inch, by the way. And the super popular Recon FPV, Recon 7, that one's weighing in at 580 grams with the sidearm braces. So that's pretty impressive. That's fairly light, as well as one of the crowd favorites, the iFlight Chimera7 Pro. That one is the heaviest out of the bunch, weighing in at 726 grams for the airframe and the components. And Croc V3 on the scale again, weighing in at 687 grams. So now you're looking at the top view inside the Croc 7 V3. And I was telling you guys about the simplicity of this quad. For a 7-inch with all of the wires and the complications that we've had with GPS and everything else in the past, this is really refreshing to look in here. And before I added my receiver, the only thing I saw in here was the flight controller, the ESCs, and the DJI O3 sitting back here. I mean, it's literally a tiny little square for the VTX and the 4K DVR stacked together right there, and the wires coming up over to the XT60 in the back right there. And then I just added my wires and my crossfire right here. So I'm going to show you how to solder up TBS crossfire on this quad coming up, and I'm gonna make sure that your wires are on the right terminals as well. We'll go further into that in the full setup video coming up of this quad. But I also thought it was cool that there was a lot of extra room in the front up here, and this is where I would install my external beeper. So you can power your external beeper off the flight controller to keep that external battery charged. It's essentially a beeper with a tiny little battery that you can stick down in this spot right here. If your battery becomes disconnected back here, that little beeper will beep up to about 2 days, and they're about $10, and they chirp pretty loud. It will help you find your quad in the woods. And with this top plate on here, it's going to be nicely protected in here in a crash. Now also they have a spot up front right here. You may notice a little kind of TPU arm that comes over my Immortal T right here. It has 2 exit holes side to side, and they have, basically they're not connected to the frame here, so you can lift them up and slide your Immortal T forward there to hold into place, and that's working quite well for me on my Croc 75 V3. So also, again, like these side plates are removable. We can just pull them up like that, and as I was showing you, they are separate pieces, which I think is really, really cool. So if I want to have more air on my O3 back here, they're that simple to pull off. They're really, really nicely put on here and easy to remove. It's really nice to have such an easy access to the side plates without a lot of fuss. So just like that, they go right back on, and they kind of have nice airflow through here, and they have a little exit here, as well as kind of a contour that goes straight out the back right there with an exit hole there. So let's get into some final thoughts and takeaway of the Geprc Croc75 V3. It's a very new design to Geprc, and this design, it's a pretty fair departure from the original Croc that we started out with. They now have side plates. They have a more simplistic design inside here and extra room for adding external beeper and things like that. Most of the things that long range guys want, you have extra room and cargo space inside this frame, which I think is cool. I also like the fact that they've already released the frame kit. So if you want to grab extra parts or even an extra spare frame kit, you can do that. I think the motors are gorgeous as well. I have to say, like, congrats to Geprc for making some really nice looking wheels on this quad. I love the way they look, and I actually like them better than any of the other motors here on this table. I think the only other motor that's nice is maybe the Zing 2809s here from iFlight. Those looked a little bit big to me though out of the box, and a large motor on a 7-inch kind of scares me because I'm thinking, like, I don't want high amp draw on a 7-inch. I want the minimum amount of throttle that I can get to keep the nose up to get the longest amount of flight time. And that's what I'm really looking for a long range FPV. And again, I feel like Geprc could have added an external beeper on here to make it super legit with the long range crowd. But I also got 17 sats with the GPS in the back. This over-under design for the antenna system in the back worked pretty well. I wasn't sure about that, but that's totally fine. And I had great penetration even behind the baseball field chain link fences, and that's where analog historically you lose all or almost all of your video when you go behind a baseball field chain link fence, and if you've ever tried that before, you know what I'm talking about. But DJI O3 system just penetrates straight through that. TBS Crossfire did not fail safe, and it's a nice reliable system, and that's what I talk about with long range. You want to have a system that's reliable and something that you trust. When you send this quad out there for range flying, you don't want to feel like you're going to fail safe at any minute and feel like you're on pins and needles worrying about whether you're going to lose signal. But again, set up your GPS, bench test it, field test it, all that good stuff, and make sure it works and it's operational before you like send it up the mountain or down the mountain. So these can be a lot of fun. This has a very large, big, solid, predictable, smooth tune on here. So it flies a lot like, I compare them to like RC gliders in a way. So these are the gliders, the sailplanes, if you will, of the FPV quadcopter universe, really. They're the sailplanes. You got to try a 7-inch or a 7.5-inch. It's great. And there is even a feel difference between the 7.5-inch and the 7-inch quads. It's actually pretty cool, and you can get much longer flight time, 20 to 30 minutes with the Lion pack. So I love that we're removing the GoPros off here now. And if I had to rate these, say 1 through 5 for my favorite for 2023, I'm gonna have to say it's a toss-up between these two, the Chimera7 Pro and the Croc75 V3. But I feel like I'm leaning more toward the Chimera7 as my favorite. So I'll say Chimera7 number 1, Croc V3 say number 2, but really, again, it's kind of a toss-up, and I haven't flown this one enough to really tell you if this one's my favorite yet. So more flying on this one before I can tell you it's my absolute number 1. The Recon 7 also is probably number 3. I would say Foxeer's 7-inch is my number 4 pick, and my number 5 pick would be the Axis foldable, more portable 7-inch out there you can get. So this one's just a little heavier than the rest of the crew here. And this one came in somewhere around the middle in the weight test. So Foxeer being the lightest out of the bunch. And I'd say the cult favorite's probably the Recon 7 here. A lot of guys seem to like this frame with the side braces too. But I think the best tuned on the bench here is probably the Chimera7 Pro and the Geprc 75 V3. So I have to do a little bit of tuning on this one. I want to share that with the community coming up as well. And we'll get more into some 7-inch long range on the channel. You can check out my links down below. If you want to see more on the Croc 7, be sure to subscribe because we're going to do a full setup guide on the Croc75 V3 as well coming up. So that will be good for beginners looking to get into range flying. It's a lot of fun and it's a lot of practice and kind of trusting your system. So that's very important that you get the right quad. So check out my quads down below, my favorites 1 through 5. Grab one. If you do, let me know if you grabbed one. Jump in our Discord and have a conversation with us about range flying or FPV freestyle or even FPV racing. It's all in there in the Drone Camps Discord. Almost at 1,000 pilots now, so that's super cool. But again, I'm Justin Davis. Please subscribe on my channel, and I appreciate you watching. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one.